Temporal life has an end. The life that Jesus gives is eternal and doesn't end. Are you experiencing the life of Jesus? This is episode 4 with guest Summerlin Van Dyke. Together, we gather.
Shut up and sit down.
Hey, welcome to In Process, where we gather to remind one another what Jesus has done, what Jesus is doing, and what Jesus will do. People invest in what they believe in, so show us if you believe in what we're doing by clicking that thumbs up. Gather with us regularly by clicking that subscribe button. Enjoy! Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Van Dyke, and this is Summer Lynn Van Dyke, and we are continuing our conversation. We have gathered today to do this podcast called In Process, and we are picking up where we left off, where Summer Lynn was on the trail, the Appalachian Trail, and she was just getting into how creation helped her to develop an intimacy with God. And I would like to know a little bit more about the rest of her trail experience. And so that's what we're going to get into, the rest of Summer's trail experience today. So first, how are you, Summer?
I'm good.
Yeah?
I'm doing well. Yes.
Why?
Still because Jesus is ruling and reigning.
Do you think that's ever going to change?
I don't know if I have a different answer, to be honest.
I hope you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I ate some really good food earlier, so that also helps a little bit.
It's helpful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It gives temporal life.
Yeah, for sure. No,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Also, this lemon water is bomb today
Yeah.
for some reason. I don't know why. So
Yeah. I mean, water. God created water.
Yep.
And not only did he create water to refresh our thirst, but he is the living water.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
He created water so that we could understand he refreshes our thirst.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's a little bit what we were talking about, how creation was created for us,
Mm-hmm.
but not creation for us so that we can exploit it and extract it and abuse it and all of those kind of things. But like creation was created so that we could understand God greater. That's gospel.
Totally.
That's good stuff. Yeah. So, and just we're gathering to remind each other of what Jesus has done, what he is doing, and what he will do. And that is why we're having this conversation. We're not doing a podcast for podcast's sake. We're doing a podcast so that we can remind each other of what Jesus has done, what he is doing, and what he'll do. This is for us. And we happen to set up video cameras and develop sound and all that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. So anyway, let's get into your trail experience.
Cool.
I'm kind of excited to know a little bit more about it.
Cool.
And we have dialed in most of the technical difficulties, so I don't think that's going to be quite the problem that it was before. I'm still a little distracted by it, but we'll see see if I can just fully zone in here and not think about any of this stuff out here. Anyway, so you're hiking the trail and you are past the 10 days with mom. Your friend has come out. You decided that she's not going to stay on trail with you.
Mm-hmm.
You spent some alone time just with your thoughts, and that has impacted you. What's next?
Yeah. Well, and we touched on a little bit of that, like, feeling of loneliness lasting about like a month and a half.
Yeah.
So I'd say after my friend left, that feeling of loneliness didn't start right away because the feeling of independence was very prominent at that point. But that didn't last very long, like maybe a few days. And then after that, it became more of a lonely thoughts in my head. And just like understanding, realizing that like being alone is okay and being in my own thoughts is okay as well. It didn't really change drastically, I would say. But after that point in time, I felt a little more comfortable, like with the people I was hiking with the environment, and I settled in a little bit more to what I was doing. And my body was also not being so intensely challenged. Like I was able to climb mountains without it being, super, super challenging.
So physically, you're starting to get more fit. You're starting to understand the rhythms a little bit more, what it's like to live day in and day out on the trail.
Yeah.
You're starting to develop community at this point. So we're about a month and a half in, right?
Yeah, I would say the community I was hiking with was fully developed by halfway through.
Halfway through the whole trail.
Yeah.
But we're only a month and a half in, and for anybody who doesn't understand what hiking the Appalachian Trail looks like as a through hiker, it takes approximately how long to do those 2,200 miles?
5.5 to 6 months.
5.5 to 6 months. So we're only a month and a half in recollection. And so, like, what I'm wondering is, like, when did you eventually develop? So why don't we just talk about community? Mm-hmm. And again, during this time on the trail, though God is familiar with you, though you feel like he's a friend, you're seeing him through creation and he's there. Would you say from this point, reflecting back, that's what we're doing, that your heart was being satiated, being satisfied by him?
No,
he's just a thing somewhere in the mix.
Yeah.
But really, you're looking to what for satiation?
Still community, probably, at that point.
So community,
and I think that was maybe music a little bit too, or
so
entertainment, I guess.
So
in general.
we're about a month and a half in. Your friend isn't going to come with you now at this point in time. Oh. You're alone on the trail, but you're looking forward to meeting with people on breaks at night when you're all sheltering together, and then but you don't really have like a set community per se. It's very transient.
Yeah. So
month and a half in.
Yeah. It's really changing at that point. Like I would say, I had met everyone that I was going to end up hiking with the entire, like end up summiting with or finishing the trail with.
Yeah.
I had met everyone at that point, and I had hiked with all of them for a significant period of time. But there was only one of them at this point that I had hiked with consistently for a while. Yeah. And then starting to be a second person. But other than that, the other couple people I wasn't consistently hiking with at that point. So, yeah, it was just two that were kind of off and on.
Yeah, so let's work through that a little bit. So by the time you summited, you had a pretty good little pack, right? And would you say, and this is kind of irrelevant, but would you say that people who hike on the AT, some of them develop little packs and some don't?
I would say it's pretty common, honestly.
When I say little packs, I mean like you just start to...
You get the same pace.
Clicks or packs develop, and that's based on pace mainly?
Mainly pace.
So you
pace and interest, I guess, are
pace
really...
and interest.
Yeah.
So both are happening.
Yeah.
Okay. And so like...
and benefit as well, like group dynamic benefit.
Yeah.
Like, if you create a Mod Podge family of a sort.
Yeah.
So like whatever works better together, like, whoever fits that.
Yeah, because
that's what it ends up being.
Because God created family.
Yeah.
And family is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But it's a metaphor for something much greater, an eternal family. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have an eternal family, you're going to develop little temporal families.
Yeah.
And those two things can coincide as well, really. Because you can be part of an eternal family and also have little temporal families that really aren't connected. But you're not really in an eternal family for the most part. No. Maybe you're on the you're being drawn to that through creation and different things.
And there was conversation about it, but it was never, I mean, you're with each other a lot. So there was conversation about it. It was never something that was actually like brought forward, I guess, as anything concrete.
Yeah.
But
so you're really developing your family based on your own personality and how it interacts with these other people, the benefit, and then pace.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you ended up developing a little pack or a little family at some point in time along the trail. And you said that was probably about halfway in?
Halfway in was when we were all, like, for sure hiking together, like, for the rest of the trail. So halfway beyond, we were all officially hiking together.
Okay. And then pretty much stuck that out the rest of the trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had others join. We had one other person join our group for a little while. And then one of the guys, unfortunately, he like went ahead of us for a day. And then we literally never caught up to him. And that was way up in Maine. We're all super bummed about that. And so is he. But yeah. So.
Yeah. And you were super bummed because you developed this family.
Yeah.
And together as a family, you wanted to summit together as a family.
And also to me personally, he was, and one of the other guys, so us three, the guy that ended up hiking ahead of us and me and one of the other guys had been pretty consistently hiking together, like quite a bit before halfway mark. So us three were, out of all of us, had been hiking together the most consistently for the whole trail. And so like, and I personally felt closest to him a lot of the time. I felt, I don't know, the biggest connection, I guess. And so it was pretty sad for me when I...
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about that, because now your main connection, and we'll get to this at some point, but in the conversation, but today, your main connection is who?
Well, I'll list their names first.
No, I mean like today, like in this day to day, your main connection with relationship isn't necessarily a person. It is a person. Very
Jesus.
much so a person. Is Jesus, right? And so like, and we'll get into that. I guess that's where I'm driving with this conversation, is really like understanding at that point in time it wasn't.
Yes.
Right? So you weren't personally connecting with Jesus on a daily basis at this point.
No.
And so because you weren't.
And if I was connecting with Jesus on a basis at all, it was out of behavior, not out of like desire.
And when you say, when you say something like it was out of behavior, you mean, were you doing the right thing or not?
Right.
Were you pleasing to him? And if you weren't, you were feeling guilty or shame. So then you would try to like not think about him, maybe.
Yeah.
Or grovel and say, sorry, I'll try better next time, and then move about your day.
Yeah.
Right. Which is also displacing him.
And so that came in the form of like talking to him on trail, and mainly like the real behavioralism, I think, came in when I was like trying to read my Bible and stuff on trail.
So you were trying, like you either were or you weren't. So were you reading your Bible on trail?
At points.
Yeah. And so like what, we're kind of diving off the community thing, but what was that like? Why were you doing it?
I grew up doing it, and I felt that was missing, but I wasn't necessarily connecting on what was actually missing.
So it was more of like a religious comforting experience.
Yeah.
You weren't doing it because you desired, I mean, probably somewhere in there was a desire to know God.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was saying. Like I wasn't realizing what I was actually missing.
Yeah.
But I was searching. So I was searching for it, but not necessarily in a way of like health. Just kind of in what I felt was right.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you didn't do it, did you feel like guilty or shame or anything like that?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit. Like towards the end, I literally like sent my Bible home.
Yeah.
And because and I sent a lot of things home that were actually important, like my stove as well was at the same time. But it was kind of a whatever thing, I guess. I don't know.
It was unnecessary.
Yeah.
To daily life.
Yeah.
At that point in time in your life, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, was there guilt over that, or did you feel bad or anything like that?
When I sent it home?
Yeah.
Not really. At that point, it was just I hadn't read it really in a while, and I just said I'll read it on my phone or something. My phone had come back at that point too.
Okay.
So
you had your phone with you on trail.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had a Bible on your phone.
Yeah.
And so would you say that you were justifying all that?
Oh, hugely. Yeah.
Huh.
Huge justification.
Yeah.
Like in my head, that was my process. Like I'll send this Bible home, but it's fine because I have one on my phone now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And so also, and we'll get back into the pack family thing, but when you would have, off and on, it sounds a little bit like you're still tying in reading the Bible and your relationship with God a little bit through your parents or through your family back home.
Yeah, I think the only guilt I did with sending my Bible home was when I called you guys and got questions about what was going on.
That's where I was going with it.
Yeah.
Because you knew you'd get questions from me specifically.
Yeah.
About like,
and
hey,
Mom.
how are you doing? Because that was a huge part of our conversation about sending you, blessing you off on trail was like, hey, like you're going to have a lot of opportunity. And just side note, God had like prepared me a bit. I've lived a bit of a hippie life. I don't know if hippie is the right word, but just that type of life where I understand trail people. I lived as like a trail. I never hiked like that, but I lived as like a trail person for a little while and really got into the concert scene, wanted to travel. I would have traveled with Fish if I had the opportunity.
It's a huge culture
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
though it's like a different, like specifically trail hiking culture is like a little bit different. There's the people who hike trails like that have a specific culture.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It's not. Yeah, I fit into it differently in all of the places I went. The school I went to had that similar culture.
Yeah.
The camp I worked at had that similar culture.
Yeah.
It was very similar.
Yeah.
Even though there was different tasks being done.
That should be a topic that we podcast at some point. Because that's really interesting. Because you're right. Each one of those had a very distinct culture that was similar.
Yeah.
It was nuance in its how it fit in, but it had a way. Whereas maybe like somebody who was in like sports their whole life. High school sports, college sports, professional sports, if they make that, there's cultures, very distinct. And so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Subculture is what you'd probably call that. But anyway, you'd call back and have some guilt when you'd relate to us. And like, so did you feel like at the time that guilt was fully coming from your parents? Did you recognize that wasn't coming from your parents, or did you think it was?
I thought it was fully coming from my parents.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize that at all.
Yeah.
And I consistently thought that till school, like till I found Jesus again, really. Yeah. That's what
or he found you.
Yeah.
Yeah, however that works.
Yeah, whatever. However that discovery was.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get back into the community aspect of it. And so because your heart's not being satiated by God, you're looking for community.
Yep.
Right? And so you're finding this community based on personality, based on trail speed, benefit, practical, pragmatic benefits, because you're very pragmatic on this trail. right? Pragmatic meaning
Yeah.
logical. It's working for you. Utilitarian
For sure. Yes.
Thinking. You have goals. So like you wouldn't necessarily be on the trail to make relationships, and then you're going to sacrifice your trail for relationships, though some of those people on the trail might have been like that. I'm sure you ran into some of those people.
Yeah, but it's interesting you mentioned that because our group specifically wasn't like that, and that is actually why
you all worked together.
We worked together, but also split up at points too.
Sure.
So that was actually a huge thing for our group. A lot of groups like basically depended on each other and they wouldn't move on without each other. Our group didn't necessarily do that. That wasn't true. Like if someone wanted to like hike more that day, they just did. It wasn't like a question. It was like part of our group's culture specifically.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
I actually have a friend who hiked the trail a year. Well, she just finished this last. Man, no, it's almost been a year probably for her too. Anyway, the year after me, I think.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to her a lot. I really have just seen some of her posts and stuff.
Yeah.
But she, I think, had a different group culture than I did.
You should totally get together with her.
Yeah.
I wonder how she's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I think that there could be a lot of like, I mean, once it's kind of like the military. You know, my military friends, you go through and people talk about how when you're on the war field or when you're going through boot camp or when you're going through the military in general, you just don't ever lose those friends. And the reason why is there's a commonality that you've been through something together in a way that nobody else understands.
Yes.
And so
like fully,
yeah.
like no one else will understand it.
Yeah.
But except for your people that you've been through it with.
Yeah, yeah. Or other people who have done it.
Right.
You can kind of compare notes of sorts.
Yeah.
You know, oh, your fellow AT hiker, you know, yeah, me too, whoa, you know, or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so tell me a little bit more about the dynamics of your group, your culture, and what you were looking for. What were you looking for? What do those people offer you?
Yeah, I was looking for people who are my pace, which the people who I hiked with, I actually caught up to their pace because I was slower than them at first. But I knew I wanted to push myself really hard, so I went with someone who was a little bit faster than me, and ended up physically pushing myself pretty hard. So that was kind of a dynamic, but it wasn't like...
What kind of pace are we talking? Give us a reference. I mean, for anybody who's like, most people who have hiked will understand a little bit of this, but most people don't have a clue, and so like they haven't hiked day in and day out.
Yeah.
And so like,
yeah, so it's kind of hard to like give an example of what kind of pace, but like I would say on average we wanted to complete, if it was an easy day, we would usually shoot for 20 miles a day. If it was a hard day, we were okay with shooting for like 10 miles a day. But like on average, we hiked like 2 miles an hour, I would say. And that was a pretty good pace for us on easy flat ground, more so days. We would hike closer to 3 miles an hour or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I guess that's a good gauge.
Yeah.
We also didn't necessarily all hiked together. So there was that aspect. We did some days, towards the end of the trail, we almost all hiked together every single day. Like in a group, we hiked together. Versus other points on the trail, we all came to the same place, but we didn't hike together.
So you mean like you would camp out in the same place, you would all leave from the same place, and then you would all go at your different paces, and then end up at the same place.
Yeah, and part of that was just like, everyone still is figuring out their own pace. And so it takes a little while to like nail down how fast you go.
So a lot of that was how many miles a day are we going to accomplish?
Most of it
based on the terrain.
Yeah.
Right, because some of your group might accomplish, let's say you hit 20 miles. Some of them might hit that in like 6 hours?
Yeah.
Yes, 4 hours, something like that.
Six or more.
I'm not gonna do the math in my head.
Yeah,
right
I was
now.
gonna say.
Yeah. So 6 hours.
No,
Where-
it
no,
would have
like-
been much
like-
longer. But anyway, yeah, just
Yeah.
probably
so
10 hours.
10 hours.
But that's like with breaks, and we would include like our 2 mile an hour pace was always including breaks, lunch, all that kind of stuff.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, I'm clueless. I'm shooting in the dark here.
Yeah,
so
that's
like,
fine.
lead
understand.
me, guide me along.
Yeah.
So like a 20-mile day, you're hiking for, including breaks, around, maybe not you specifically, but somebody in your group. So there's, out of the 5 people in your group, like one might hit that in 10 hours, one might hit that in 12 hours, one might hit that in 8 hours. I'm being theoretical here.
Yeah.
But you're all landing in the same place.
Yes, for
So
sure.
how much of a difference on a 20-mile day? How much of a difference? How many hours difference is like your slowest out of the 5? Is the slowest one and the fastest one? Is there a couple hours?
Yeah, usually like 2 hours there was often. If the slowest one was going slow and the fastest one was going fast,
Yeah.
it was usually like 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah. So I'm
Possibly.
going. Yeah.
Depending
So
on distractions.
2 to
and stuff,
3
but yeah.
hours. That fastest person could be getting 2 to 3 hours further every day if they weren't only wanting to stay with that group.
Yeah, but it wasn't necessary. Again, for our group, it wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily out of let's stick together. It was just out of what you want to do. So, like, if they were going really fast, they just wanted to hike fast that day. So, like, sometimes our slowest person, which was actually me most of the time, but sometimes the slowest person ended up getting there first just because they didn't want to take a lot of breaks that day, didn't want to, stop that much, and they just wanted to cruise that day and just wanted to get over with the day faster. Maybe they were having a hard day and they just wanted to just stick some headphones in and hike as fast as they could.
Yeah, so I guess my point is there is a pretty, even though you're all basically wanting to be independent and go together in an independent hiking style group, there still is that connection together that made it worth it for you all to decide to do that together.
For sure.
So there's definitely probably a stronger personality aspect of that. I mean, sure, there's like slow hikers on the trail, and there's like let's hike together right in front of each other kind of deal. And you guys didn't do that.
We ended up doing that, actually. We hiked all together as a group almost every day for the last month, I would say.
That's super
maybe more than
fascinating.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because we all became the same pace. We actually did. We all, except for maybe up a really, really steep hill, like 1,000-foot climb over like half a mile, that kind of steep of a hill.
Yeah.
Because you can never be the same pace with that.
Yeah.
But
so I want to hear a little bit more about how you ended up coming together as a group, independent hikers, all being willing to hike at your own pace but stay together as a group.
Yeah.
From not knowing each other to sorting that all out to then actually at the end hiking together every day.
Yeah.
Because that's you're almost you're growing together.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we got to take a little break and we'll be right back.
Awesome.
All right, so we're back, and tell me a little bit about how you think that dynamic happened. What were you guys drawn to? Because there had to have been something, and it's going to be different for each person, obviously. But the 5 of you really, out of how many hikers are on the trail? How many people do you have to choose from to develop your little families or packs?
Yeah, so everyone starts at different times, obviously, so I don't exactly know, but on average, about 2,000 people attempt the Appalachian Trail every year. I know that number. I think it's 50% quit by 50 miles in or 100 miles in, 35 more quit by 300 miles in, and then by halfway, I think it's only 25% of those are left or something like that.
So there's a little bit of a war of attrition. Out of 2,000 people, 500 people finished the whole trail.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember exactly how many people actually finish in comparison to how many start. But I think the year I Finished, there was like a little under 1,000 people that actually finished the trail. It was like 900 or 800 or something like that.
Sure.
But that's out of like everyone who hikes, and so there's different directions you can hike. You can hike north or south.
Oh, right.
I was hiking north.
The majority probably start south to north, right?
Yeah, I would say
because it's tougher to go
at least 70%.
Because your season's shorter if you go north to south.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's not necessarily shorter. It's just you start later in the year and end later in the year.
Oh, right.
It's just opposite.
Right. True.
Yeah.
Because it's warm.
Yeah, you're still hiking
right.
into a warmer climate, but yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so there's that dynamic too, and I would say a lot more of the people who are hiking south wanted more of a solo experience versus the people hiking north kind of wanted more of a group experience.
Why do you think that was?
Less people hikes from south to north, from north to south in general. And as soon as you start researching the trail, you know that immediately that it's way more common to start in Georgia and hike to Maine than it is the other way around.
Yeah.
And then also it's just, I don't know. You start with the harder terrain, which splits people up much more as well.
Yeah. So obviously, as your dad, I'm learning as we're having these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think that some of these things maybe I would have known, but
that's right.
It shows you a little bit.
You didn't hike the whole thing with me either, though. So there's that.
Anyway, trust God for a lot of things. Definitely my kids. When did you go into the trail knowing that you were going to connect with other people? Were you looking forward to that? Is that one of the reasons why you went to go hike the trail?
Yeah, so here's part of it too. When I researched the trail, I didn't research that super well.
Sure.
So I didn't really know that super well until I started hiking. So I didn't understand the culture fully until I started hiking. I didn't know how many people were going to really actually be around.
So it wasn't really a factor. You were mainly,
not as much.
In your mind's eye, as you were heading to the trail, it was more for the trail's sake. The people thing happened and the culture thing happened and all that happened as you were on the trail.
Yeah, I knew I was going to meet cool people. I knew I was going to hike with cool people that I enjoyed hiking with. I did desire for that to happen.
Yeah.
But I didn't go on the trail thinking that was going to be such a big factor as it ended up being.
So you define that a little bit. That's interesting. By cool people. You knew you were going to meet cool people. Did you know you were going to meet uncool people? Did you meet uncool people?
I did meet uncool people.
I
didn't really think about that. So, I either thought it was going to be cool people or people that were very weird, creepy kind of, honestly. Yeah. That's kind of the distinction I thought.
Yeah.
Which was actually kind of ended up being kind of true. But
so there are weird, creepy people on the trail.
Yeah. And being a female, I would say that comes out more prominently.
Sure.
Especially being a younger female.
Yeah.
But
so what's your definition of weird, creepy? Because different people might define that differently.
Yeah, I would say just more in your personal life space than you want them to be.
Did you ever feel physically at risk? Like you were in a place of danger?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, and again, just because people are going to be interested in my mind, as a dad, that's where I had to just thoroughly trust. There was a moment, and maybe I'll share this a little bit some other time, but there was a moment I had right before you left that it all started flashing before my eyes. Summers, your whole life started flashing before my eyes about how I raised you, and I'm confident God brought that to me. And I remember it was a pretty emotionally intense experience for me. And I just said, okay, God, you better love her better than I do.
Which he did. So,
that
happened.
He definitely does. And so that was why I was willing to not interfere with your goal of going to hit the trail, because I don't protect you. I believe God does. Now, am I a part of co-missioning with God and protecting you? Yeah, without question. And I think I've done a fairly decent job at that, but I've definitely made mistakes. I've definitely, there's been things that I have not prepared you for, and I had to trust that He would fill in those gaps. Ever since you were, just to finish the thought, ever since, so you're our oldest daughter, and when Jen and I came together and got married and had our first summer, had you, we, from the very beginning, just in our conversation with God, said, okay, God, we're going to do the best that we can, but you have to fill in the gaps. Like, we'll commission with you, but we're limited. And so we've always been humble and understanding our limitations.
Yeah.
And we've always had at least that type of a trust that we're going to blow it. And God fill in those gaps, and He does. And sometimes in a way that, is hard to watch, but that's okay, because that too, we trust Him with. And so anyway, just
and actually off of that, I wanted to kind of touch on that protection piece a little bit more too.
Yeah.
Because from the view of what God allows.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, like, you couldn't protect me when I was there.
Right.
And God may have not protected me in a way that you thought was like up to your standard. So like, there's that too. I think that's a huge piece of like, when I tell people that I hiked the trail, and when they realize how young I was when I hiked it, that question seems to be a huge prominent fear of people, is like, weren't you nervous? Weren't you scared? Were your parents nervous? Were your parents scared? And obviously, like, yes, but I just think there's this overall thing where people aren't necessarily trusting in what God's plan looks like, what God's protection looks like, because what He allows is good and is helpful. It is part of His plan.
So at this moment, there's probably, if people are watching and hearing you say that, there's some people who have been through some pretty horrifying experience that want to jump through the screen and say, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, what gives you the audacity to suggest that God allowing something to go, some kind of tragedy to happen past what we think is okay, to call that good?
What is my context for that?
Yeah, what gives you there's going to be people who like how dare you say that?
Yeah, I think there's several reasons why God has given me that confirmation.
Sure.
Part of it is actually what I've personally been through.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this more as well, but I wouldn't say my pregnancy was something that I thought God should have allowed to happen.
Got it. That's
so
good.
There's that.
Yeah.
And there's just the aspect of, like, if God is in control, then why are we doubting what's happening?
What He allows to happen.
And so,
and He's good. If God's in control and He's good, then why are we questioning it?
Yeah.
So like, if we are questioning it, there's a good chance that either we're having a hard time with God, understanding God's sovereignty, or His goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is like what I just feels really important to communicate. And I did feel like I realized that concept actually when I was hiking the trail. And I think that was just God speaking to me, even when I was in a place of not full community with Him.
So was some of that naivety?
Yeah, totally. I think some of it was naivety.
Yeah.
But it was also, as I went learning and growing and realizing that was true, after trail.
So again, in his sovereignty, he was allowing you to be naive to a degree to allow you the experience.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. Because he could have made you more aware of the potential, but you didn't feel he needed to, because even if something were to occur, like you're trusting. So it's both and. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So it was just something I wanted to bring up because I feel that Jesus is really like, out of a lot of my trail experiences, that is a huge message that I think he's given me to share with others. Yeah. Is immediately when those questions come up, being able to reassure someone through Jesus. Yeah. Like that.
It's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it is powerful.
So so what you're suggesting is he knew that you would want to do this Appalachian Trail. And he, whether through naivety or through assurance, he helped you to go do that trail, so that now post-trail, working through other people's processing of the fear of what were you thinking going on this trail, now you can share a message that suggests, not just suggests, but declares you can trust God. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, and it was huge. To me, that's, and we'll get into this, but that's a little bit, did you pick that up in Romans?
Honestly, I think I need to go reread Romans because I don't totally know what I picked up so drastically when I read through Romans.
Yeah, and I that's a little sneak peek for what's coming. Yeah. Because you read through Romans and that was a big part of an awakening for you. Yeah. But really your whole life has been a big part of, there's been a lot of things that were significant awakenings for you, including the trail. Yeah. And your experiences there. There's just God works through all things for the good for those who love him. And a lot of people think that somehow means God works all things for the person's good through their perspective and their expectations and their standards, and it does not mean that.
Well, and it's really interesting because when people have that belief, it's hard. It's like, where does that come from? Yeah. Because that's not true. Like, and you can ask anyone, and they're not going to say that's true. Right. They're not going to say their relationship with God has caused them to have a perfect life. Like, no one's going to say that. No one's going to say that.
But everybody wants it.
Everyone wants that. Yeah. Of course. Like, we're human beings.
We want God to be our servant. Yeah. Rather than to submit to him and allow, ourselves to be his servants. Yeah.
Yeah. And so our human flesh, of course, wants that. Yeah. But it's not necessarily something God has promised to provide. And I do think it's very interesting when people have that belief, that underlying belief, but haven't actually thought about it and addressed this hasn't happened to anyone. Yeah. So why is there this underlying belief, and why is it so strong in so many people?
Yeah, so that's fascinating. And again, I want to get back to the community part, but to keep the conversation going. But we just went 0 to 100 and like that. Yeah. And so that was pretty awesome. I didn't see that coming. And so it would be intriguing to me to understand a little bit of how you got to all of that, if it wasn't through Romans. And so how did you experientially, did you feel like God just shared those concepts with you? You've just grown in life. Was that through scripture? Was it his spirit, the Holy Spirit, just ministering that to you and awakening you to those, opening your mind and heart? And
I think a lot of that applied actually to why I discovered that. I think God opening my eyes and me being able to observe through my open eyes was really and that led to through scripture and through observation of others. Yeah. So kind of both,
Yeah.
kind of all
He's
of it.
using all things.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Because he does.
Yeah, he does.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing gets wasted.
Right.
Nothing's vain when it comes to God moving and helping grow our perspectives and whatnot. But yeah, so you're on the trail and you're developing community, and you knew you were going to hang out with some cool people, and now we understand a little bit more what that means. But so tell us more about the cool people. Why are they cool? Why did you connect with these guys? And so there's mainly, and there's a few others that like kind of came in and left a little bit for decent periods of time, but there's really a solid like 5 of you,
including me. Yeah,
including you. So you and 4 others.
Yep, and actually there was others off and on that were pretty solidly with us, I would say.
Yeah.
But ended up, I would say the 5 of us were, when we would go into town or something, we would all go together.
Yeah.
All hitch in together. We would all get food together. We would all, get a hotel together. It was all us together.
Yeah.
Mainly when we would go into town, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's you and who are the 4 other people, and you don't have to use their names. It'd be awesome if they watch this at some point. But
that's funny because I'm not going to use their names because
trail names.
They have trail names.
So just for a second, tell us what trail names.
So trail names are just names that are given to you on trail, and I think there's some in reflection again through the eyes. My eyes being opened. Trail names are a very interesting thing because it's an identity replacement, basically, which is really intriguing because a lot of people go on trail to create an identity replacement, which is really interesting and really crazy. And
that's super interesting.
And I don't think that's I don't think that's everyone. I don't think that was me, honestly. But it's just so much in that culture. And there's like some hints of protection, I guess, that go along with trail names as well. But it's almost 90% because it's like creating a new identity almost.
Yeah, that's deep. We could go
super deep. Yeah.
We could go a lot of places with that because so really it's a form of escapism for some people.
Yeah.
And then they're always going to talk about for the rest of your life, the rest of their lives, the trail.
Yeah.
Right? That back in the trail. And we all know those people, some of those people might be observing what we're doing here right now, where they're just solidly living in the past. Back in Nam, back in the Marine Corps, back in high school.
Or maybe it's not even back in, but it's like they're still doing that thing. Like they're still escaping to that place.
Sure.
So like whatever that place is, like I know I was still able to escape to that place without going back to trail necessarily.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was still being able to create that escapism lifestyle with the same stuff going on, I guess. Escapism to nature, basically, throughout, even after, the 2 years after I left trail. So.
Yeah. So you were really trying to recreate
trail life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people did that. Like a lot of people would end up doing that after trail.
Yeah. And to some degree, why not? Right? Like, if only life could be like it is on trail. Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to incorporate as much of trail life as you can in your actual life. Mm-hmm. And that's actually a huge booming industry. True?
Yeah.
What isn't it? Yeah. That's totally getting off topic and track. But the rec industry, which includes not just things like soccer league, but getting outdoors, is a huge booming industry across the globe
and becoming more of a booming thing, right?
Yeah,
I would say more so and more so as it's accessible to more and more people as well.
And so like all things, recreation to recreate is from God. God gives us the stuff to play with, and we get to recreate his stuff. We do it with food. We do it with all kinds of things. We do it with music. We do it with sound. We do it with all kinds of things. But recreation can also become a god in and of itself, and that's a little bit. If you're longing for the trail life, you're not living necessarily in reality. That's kind of what you're suggesting, right?
Yeah.
So
So trail
going
names,
all the way back to trail names.
Trail names, real quick, are just literally silly names that you get on trail. And some people don't. Some people get them within the first day. Some people don't get them till halfway in.
But everybody gets one.
But everyone typically gets one unless you're really adamant that you don't want one.
Sure.
And even then, people still give you one anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And one time I had several different trail names in the beginning.
Because you still haven't really explained what a trail name is, I'll get
there a little bit. But
tell us how yours went.
Yeah. First I had several in the beginning. And then I didn't like them, and someone explained to me at one point that you're supposed to not like your trail name a little bit in order for it to actually be your trail name. So there's this like thing of like it's just going to be stuck with you, like live with it. So you get some, saying it, but not really.
So you show up on trail, you're Summerlin Van Dyke.
Yep. So my first trail name was Linda because everyone kept thinking that my real name was a trail name. And so then they gave me a real name instead of a trail name, which was really funny. But then I had to explain every single time when I said Linda was my trail name. And they would say, no, what's your trail name? And I'd say, no, that is my trail name. My real name sounds like a trail name, blah, blah, blah. I had to explain the whole thing every time.
And that got obnoxious.
Yeah, and it got obnoxious. It was super funny. I actually liked that trail name. I thought it was awesome. And then I went through a bunch of them that lasted like maybe a couple days or a week or something like that.
Like what? Do you remember any of them? Oh
man, I'm trying to even think.
Okay.
It was like Goldilocks at one point, which was obvious. I just hated that one because it was just like, okay, you look at me and whatever. That's just not even a good story. It's just based on appearance. So there's that. But so there was that. I got that one like 4 times from different people. And then I ended up having Slap Chop, which is just a really funny trail name. But basically what happened is...
Now we gotta hear the story.
Yeah. Basically what happened is every day we would do like a little debrief of questions like, I don't know, we would do like a question of the day, and then we would do like highs and lows. So how are you doing today on a scale of 1 to 10? And then why? Like, what was your best part of the day? What was your worst part of the day? All this stuff. And we did this like every day for like, I don't know, like a month, I would say. And this was more towards the beginning of the trail. We didn't end up doing this at the end, except for just like giving our days a rating, which ended up being really funny and ridiculous anyway. But we were sitting, and for some reason the question of the day was, what is your favorite kitchen tool? And I said the Slap Chop because I think it's a genius kitchen tool because of how much I cut veggies. I don't know. It was just really random. But then they all decided that was a really funny, unique trail name and decided to give it to me. So, and like, it was more like Slap Chop. Oh, that'd be a good trail name for you. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. And then basically it just became the trail name. And then someone was like, are you okay with that? And I was like, it's fine. And so it became my trail name because I gave them the confirmation. So
you became Slap Chop.
I became Slap Chop. That didn't last very long because it's so long.
Right.
And so then it ended up being Slappy, which is even harder to explain because that sounds weird within itself.
So you left Linda, so you didn't have to explain all this, but then you ended up being Slap Chop and then Slappy. So then like, wow.
Which was even a longer story.
Now you've got a longer story built on a longer story from a longer story.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that ended up being my trail name. Yeah. We were pretty far along at that point, and so people were kind of like, just like, Summer, you need to pick a trail name. Like, get over yourself and pick a trail name.
Slappy.
You're just going to get whatever you get.
I think Slappy fits you well.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Which is...
Slap
Chop. It was
Slappy.
Funny. Yeah. So that's basically what a trail name is.
Yeah.
I can go back to saying the people who I hiked the trail with, their trail names were Peaches, because he was from Georgia.
Yeah.
That's literally the only reason why.
Yeah.
Waterboy, because he was based on the movie Waterboy.
Yeah.
He was a football coach in Alabama. I've never actually watched the movie, so I don't know what that has to do with it. But anyways, Waterboy.
Sure.
Acorn, which this describes his personality very well, but he lost his pipe that he smoked weed out of.
Sure.
And used an acorn instead.
Yeah.
So he was named Acorn.
Sure.
Which describes a lot. And then Puddin', because he was just this really, really little tiny dude. And they all went to a buffet together, and he ate only pudding. And he ate like 7 plates of pudding or something insane.
Goodness.
And was like just it didn't seem like it would fit in his body at that point anymore.
Right.
And so he became Puddin'.
Yeah.
So that was
sure.
So that was kind of a brief summary of how all of the trail names came to be.
Yeah. So it's Slappy, and 4 guys.
Yes.
Waterboy, Acorn, Peaches, Puddin'.
Yeah.
And that ended up becoming your family.
Yeah.
And so I want to hear again more about like, now that those were all great and that was a lot of good stories. But what were you looking for? How did you guys gel? And right after we take another break. All right, back again. Why don't we wrap up this podcast with a little bit of some of the factors that really drew you to commune with these guys.
Yeah. So this is good because I think this is in reflection a lot to do with what Jesus was doing in my life and stuff like that. A lot of what drew me to the people that I chose was Christ-like features in these different people. And which is very interesting. And I think it was different for each of them, but a lot of them, it was just like depth and understanding of creation. It was
hold on.
For others.
I gotta just like, we gotta stir this up a little bit.
Yeah.
So would any of these guys profess to be believers in Jesus for their hope and salvation?
One of them.
And so out of all 4 of these guys, only one of them. But what you're suggesting is you saw Christ.
Maybe two of them.
Maybe 2. But what you're suggesting is you saw Christ in them.
Yes.
And that's what drew you to them.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. We'll probably launch into a conversation about that at some point in time. And I should probably have a list of all the different things
that we're going to go into.
Yeah, maybe off podcast we can dialogue a little bit about that. But like, so tell me more.
So the one that actually would have professed to be a believer.
Yeah.
He was the first one I started hiking with. That was Waterboy. And we actually talked in depth about that. A lot. Yeah. I would say for the majority of the first couple weeks that we hiked together, we talked a lot about that kind of stuff. And like what that looked like growing up, what that looked like now, which is super interesting because neither of us were walking in that at all. And that was pretty obvious. But So
hold on.
Yeah.
What do you mean neither one of you were walking in that at all? Like you're suggesting while on trail.
Mm-hmm.
So you were to a degree though, because you were being ministered to by creation.
Yeah. Action wise, we weren't necessarily walking in that. Like the choices we were making were, I wouldn't say, Christ-like.
So again, help me understand. And maybe this is a little incriminating, but give it, whatever. Like one of the things that I believe in very thoroughly is whatever we invest in is what we believe in.
Yeah.
Time, talent, treasure, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so of God, you want to believe in him, but really you're working that out.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's with you,
Mhm.
but you're working it out.
Mhm.
And so, but there must be like really big aspects then where your life on trail isn't being reflected in belief in God.
Yeah.
And so like enough for you to say like not at all.
Yeah.
So like what do you mean? Like you're what are you doing on trail that's so like antichrist?
Yeah.
So not of God.
Yeah.
That would be that
would have me say that.
That would have you say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of it was just my search for God. And stumbling over other gods through that search. That's what I would say. That's a good way, I would say, to describe all of the things.
Yeah.
Because it really wasn't just like the bad things. It was other things that came with that. It was my determination for the trail specifically and my obsession with that. And me looking to that as almost an idol at times. It was
So you're suggesting your determinism, your determination, I mean, was a God to you at times.
Yeah,
that
at times.
was the most important thing, more than people, more than maybe even yourself, more than God. So it wasn't only just the bad things. And just for example, incriminate yourself.
Yeah.
Feel free.
Yeah,
like
it was
the bad things.
Yeah, so I was using drugs. I was drinking alcohol very excessively.
Sure.
And turning to those things as saviors, or to have entertainment or a good time. Those are things I was putting my hope in to like rescue me from a bad day or something like that.
Got it.
So there was those where I would say most people would see that and say it was like typically like a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to touch on the fact that it was definitely other things too.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
Maybe other things even more so
were
the things that were actually keeping me from God than those things.
So your success and drive could have been a false god in your life. You were turning to yourself to like drive and make yourself happy in your accomplishments and your mile achievement for the day, those kind of things, rather than turning to God. And so you're having a bad day, you're going to get a few more miles and that's going to make you feel good, rather than turning to God. Mm-hmm. That's profound, because I think that idea is going to come up over and over and over. And that's one of the major points of the podcast. The purposes of the podcast is to help people understand that it's not just smoke and dope that is the problem.
Yeah.
It's not just, cussing that's the problem.
And actually, I would even go to say that the action in itself has nothing at all to do with, it's your heart behind it. So the action shows your heart behind it. So therefore, yes, of course the action is not okay.
Right.
But it's not anything to do with the action at all.
The fruit of the belief.
It's the fruit of what's actually going on in your heart.
Yeah.
And so that's the huge thing behind it. And that's why I'm able to say that my belief and determination, or, whatever else I was turning to, was just as bad with just as distancing, I guess, from my relationship with God as me turning to alcohol or marijuana.
Totally.
Yeah. So
brilliant.
there was definitely that going on. Stuff.
Yeah. So you and Waterboy connected the most
at the beginning of the trail.
Beginning.
Yeah.
Because you had shared backgrounds or whatever. But so tell me, what did you see? So you saw Christ-like qualities in Waterboy.
Yeah.
Because we're all created in the image of God, right?
Yeah.
So even somebody who doesn't profess Christianity, maybe they even say that they're an atheist. We believe that they're still created in God's image, so therefore they reflect him, even when they're denying him and don't want anything to do with him.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were created in his image. So though they're broken from him relationally, they can look a lot like him in a lot of different ways, right? They're just not empowered necessarily by him, because they're not open to him, for him to enter into union with them, becoming one with them, being empowered through his spirit, right? Anyway, so tell me a little bit more about what aspects, what qualities, how did you see Jesus in Waterboy? And we might only have time to just get to Waterboy, but
Yeah.
I really love this.
Yeah.
Like, I want to understand more how you saw Jesus in Waterboy, how you saw Jesus in Acorn, how you saw Jesus in Peaches.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Waterboy specifically at first was just the initial talking about Jesus with him. And so there was that. But then I would say also in his care, I guess, like his underlying care for others, I definitely saw Jesus in him. He had a sort of understanding, like, about how, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but just like a care for others that was very prominent, I guess.
So you would see people hurting emotionally,
yeah,
physically, all of
them, yeah,
sure,
and be able to speak to that, I guess.
Yeah.
And he did that with me at times, but I also saw him do it with other people, and so that was one of the aspects that I saw of him, and also just his depth of intrigue with creation, I guess, was something that I saw as a Christ-like feature, just like wanting to be very immersed in creation, which is something that was true for most of the guys that I hiked with. And then also, oh man, there was one thing I was just thinking of, but I lost it.
So
yeah, I remember. Sorry.
Yeah.
Also his humbleness. He was a very humble person. And he wouldn't like that just came out once in a while, but it definitely was there. Like his way of talking about trail, talking about others, stuff like that. So he was a very humble person too.
That's awesome. And so you both experienced that personally, but also saw it with other people, right? And so though he was reflecting God, he didn't necessarily believe that he was saved by God. He was still trying to save himself. There was a lot of other false gods maybe in his life as well. He was trying to still sort all that out and work that out.
Yeah.
Is that what you'd say?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember an experience that I had. This is after 18 years of like pursuing God, being a missionary, youth pastor, all these different things. And this is after growing up thinking of myself as a Christian to a degree. I was raised and went to a bunch of different types of churches, but believed myself to be that. So this is after like 38 years, or I don't know how old I was when I read the book, but I read Alan Hirsch's The Forgotten Ways and basically realized I was a polytheist. That rocked my world.
Yeah.
That like my hope was actually in my wife. My hope was actually in my job. My hope was actually in my kids. My hope was actually in me. And Jesus was somewhere in there, kind of in the background. But like really how I related to my wife would determine whether I was good or not. It had really very little to do with Jesus, though I was trying to learn about Jesus and do the right thing and all that kind of stuff, which was all based on my behavior, not on his. Which
again was actually another god.
Which was a false god.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like my Christianity was actually a false god. That blew my mind. I hope it blows a lot of other people's minds. I hope a lot of people hear that. And not just through this and us saying that, but just in general, I hope a lot of people read The Forgotten Ways and that happens to them. I hope the Holy Spirit comes beside them as they're reading that and they recognize and then they repent from that and turn from believing in themselves and their behavioralism or their whatever to Jesus instead.
And the truth is, I think that runs in almost every human. I would say there's probably not a single human on this earth that doesn't fall to that.
in some way, right? In
Yeah.
some shape, or it manifests itself in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But it's there everywhere.
Yes. And as you discover more about Jesus, that may not be something that comes to you all at once, but you may just constantly discover, oh, this is what I'm putting my hope in. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm also putting my hope in this. Oh, I'm also putting my hope in this.
Yeah, which obviously begs the question, and we're not going to get to it today. But here's another thing on our list. It obviously begs the question, how is a 21-year-old pregnant girl sitting on the other side of her dad, how did she get to this kind of understanding? Like, how did you get there?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But we're not there yet. And so we're talking about the Christ-like qualities you saw in Waterboy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's very caring for others, but his caring for others could have actually been a God in his life.
Yeah, and I think it probably was.
He was trying to be a good person by caring for other people.
Yeah, and I would say the caring for other people wasn't necessarily the direct action that came out of that unhealthy place, but there was other good person kind of things that came out, and usually those were a little bit more sideways and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I couldn't necessarily name one right now, but yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
but
so hopefully well, we can thank God for walking beside Waterboy and bringing him to a place of revelation, and know that if it's possible, God's going to get him to a place where he sees that in himself, where he's really putting his hope in himself or other things, and give him the freedom of putting his hope in Jesus rather than himself or his good behavior.
And I know that, and that's awesome. And I love that we can know that even if God doesn't give us direct evidence of that. But what's cool is I still am in contact with Waterboy, and I actually told him about my pregnancy, and though I still don't actually know where he's at, his first response to me was
where he's at with Jesus.
His first response to me was a direct look to God for your hope, basically. Which was really cool, because I wasn't actually at the beginning of my pregnancy, I wasn't in a place of look to God at that point. So that was and so basically I'm just saying that because it's cool, although we don't always see evidence of that in everyone, obviously, because that would be a lot. But it is cool when God gives us those glimpses of, hey, I am walking beside this person. Or maybe they're not fully turning to me, but I am still in their lives. I am still pursuing them. Which is cool.
And evidenced through them, even though they're maybe not submitting over to him fully, or even to a degree. Right? There's attributes of them that they desire to, because out of the people that you walked with, not all of them would profess. So Waterboy would profess to the group that he was a believer in Jesus, that he was a Christian. Okay. And that was partially, he didn't always act like it.
Right? And that was partially
which was hypocritical and inconsistent.
Right.
But the point of putting your hope in Jesus isn't our behavior, but it's our hope is in his behavior. Now, to what degree Waterboy realizes that is a different story. But a lot of people who say they won't believe in Jesus, it's because people who profess belief in Jesus aren't perfect, therefore hypocrites. But that's so ironic, because clearly people who are following Jesus haven't clearly proclaimed that message, that my hope isn't in me being perfect, it's in Jesus being perfect. Right? My hope isn't that I'm perfect. My hope is that he's perfect. But then people freak out about that and say, well, then that gives people the liberty to believe in Jesus, not be perfect. Yes. By all means. And not by all means, only by the means of Christ, incarnating, living, dying, rising again, ruling and reigning. Really.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. Anyway, but my point to that, all that was going all the way back to, so out of the 4 others that you mainly had this family with, one would proclaim that he's a believer in Christ. Maybe one other one would, but some of them very clearly weren't, right?
Yeah.
And they would share that. They would say, no, I don't believe in a God or in any God. And so difference between agnostics and atheists believe, they're convinced that there's no God, whereas agnostics hold out that they don't know if there is a God or not, but they're open to the possibility. Typically, that's kind of big, but which I've heard it said that there's no true atheist, because if an atheist is positive there is no God, then why even have the conversation?
Right.
Like, why are we even talking about it? And maybe some of them are in that place where they're just like, there is no God, and why are we even having the conversation about it?
Yeah, totally.
What's funny to me is there's many people who proclaim atheists. It'd probably be better if they said they're agnostic, but they say that they're atheists and then have these huge debates about trying to prove that there is no God. Well, why put any energy? If there is no God, why put any energy into proving there isn't one?
Right.
He just isn't.
Yeah.
Move on with your day.
Yeah.
Right. Which is always a little bit interesting to me, but which to me testifies that something's still drawing even the most ardent atheist. Ardent, is that the right word? I don't know. Arduent? I don't know. I make words up a lot. And so
kind of thing.
yeah. So moving all the way back to Waterboy. Let's land on Waterboy and land on Waterboy. That's funny. Land in our discussion on how Waterboy reflects God. So there was a humility there, and he cared for others. And then maybe next time, next time let's pick up. I really am intrigued on you developing a little bit more of the character of each person, and just kind of giving us a summary of who each person was, why you were drawn to them, who they were, and how you could see Christ's likeness in these people.
Yeah, and actually this is a kind of a later reflection, like almost right now reflection of like what I'm like, you know, in constant communication with the Holy Spirit. He's just like showing these things to me as they come, which is really cool. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I had even necessarily reflected on how much I was drawn to the personalities I was drawn to because of their Christ-likeness until now. So that's pretty cool.
Conversation on the fly, Holy Spirit is literally awakening and opening your eyes to that in this conversation. Yeah. That's what you're suggesting. Yeah. Yeah, and that's when you put your hope in Jesus rather than yourself, the Holy Spirit now can come within you and literally reveal things to you as you're talking. Like there's a oneness there. Whereas if you're rejecting Jesus, not by like rejecting him being atheistic or antichrist, but like literally just by like putting your hope in yourself rather than in him, that blocks that. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. I didn't for a long time, and am still being awoken to that. That God does reveal stuff to us in the moment. He's very present. Yeah. Yeah,
he's very present.
Very present.
Awesome.
So let's come back to that when we gather next time.
Awesome.
And so thank you very much for gathering with me again. And see you next time.
Feeling provoked, angered, encouraged, inspired by what you heard? Don't keep it to yourself. Comment below. Put your supportive beliefs into action by clicking all the clicky stuff. Lastly, gather with those around you and remind one another what Jesus has done, is doing, and will do.
Now, those were all great, and that was a lot of good stories. Right after we take another break.